Hello there, Eric back again, your Learning Futurist. Well, this is starting to wrap up my rant, maybe, of Mark Zuckerberg's announcement of his initiative to change Facebook and all of the parent company into a company called Meta and start concentrating on developing products and services for the Metaverse, something of which not necessarily called the Metaverse myself, but been working in for the last at least 10 years, developing things for mostly educational context. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the signals that were given that I've seen not only from the keynote about Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the Metaverse, but some policies, some things in their business models, in their terms of service that signal a direction, a signal, a certain type of business model, signal a certain type of behavior that we might see moving towards the future. All coming right up in this video. All right, so let's talk about signals. As a learning futurist, one of the terms you often hear is signals, something that's a representative of perhaps a behavior or a move or a shift to be seen in the future, like a butterfly's wings flapping and then the world changing later on. Futurists are trained to look for signals and interpret what they might mean, what they might turn into moving to the future. And I'd like to share some signals from Oculus, from Facebook, and from the announcement from Mark Zuckerberg turning into Meta that kind of signal some of the concerns on which from part 1 and part 2 of this video series that give me pause and concern, but a couple of optimistic things that we might be able to interpret from these behaviors as well. There are 3 main topics, and I'll go through them the best I can, one by one. First one is, of course, the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, and that is advertising. Facebook is the second largest advertiser on the internet, just behind Google. It is their main business model. It is their main reason to optimize for their bottom line, for their stakeholders, for their investors, and for the people working in the company, especially Mark Zuckerberg being the biggest holder of the company, Meta. And so advertising is going to tell us a little bit about how they might continue their current business models and project them into virtual augmented reality, especially with their Oculus line, their Quest line, the VR hardware that they've introduced as well. We can see one big signal of this that happened earlier in 2021, where they tried to approach a developer, even though that they have bought several developer companies, developer houses. Some of the leading games out there for virtual reality are now part of Meta, which were part of Oculus before. So even though that they had the ability to put advertising into one of their own games, they attempted to put their foot in the water and see the acceptability, to see what kind of data that could be, to see the possibilities of advertising in a virtual reality setting. And this game, this developer was approached, and the game Blast On, which is like a arena type game where I think the Jai-Alai, is that how you pronounce it, in the original Tron series, where you're standing on these kind of in this arena that you could fall off of, and you're shooting things at each other, throwing things at each other, and trying to survive, basically. It's a gladiator type game. And because you're in an arena, Facebook thought that they could add static advertising, and then they actually showed what that might look like in the arena. So think about taking advertising in actual sports arenas that are in the real life, right? Take that same concept and bring it into virtual reality. It's kind of an easy translation, right? You can easily explain what that might be. But in the back end, the advertising, the way it works is, especially for Facebook, is to know who you are, what you like, what you do, and what you might respond to, and target ads based on you. That is the the value proposition that they sell to advertisers to pay money to show you things that Facebook thinks you will want to buy. And that connected to virtual reality is a much bigger deal than it was even in the mobile era, even though I think it's still a big deal in the mobile era, being able to collect all the things that Facebook does about you. And so learning about this, the general public got outraged. And I watched this happen, and um, the developer that was doing this backed out of their deal with Facebook, backed out of the agreement, and this didn't happen. So whether this is going to be happening towards the future, it seems though, Facebook has already attempted to connect their data and the business model of targeting ads and looking towards a best way, or at least a way that might be possible to bring that revenue stream to virtual reality. So we can expect at least further attempts at advertising inside of virtual reality, especially with the Oculus headsets, because Facebook will then control the distribution methods, the data collection methods, connected with their other apps, and also be free without restriction like they are now with iOS and iPhones and Android devices with Google, to have that end-to-end data collection to advertiser to showing advertising to people. Now, will there be ad-free stuff? Of course. Will there be ad-free zones? Will there be different cases for children? Right now, children aren't even allowed as far as being HIPAA compliant to avoid legal issues. Facebook is saying that there shouldn't be any children inside of Facebook at all right now. All that stuff still has to be hashed out. But the signal says advertising in virtual reality as a revenue stream. Let's do it. Next is what makes that targeting data, what makes that targeting advertising successful is the collection of data. And the collection of data with using augmented virtual mixed reality is much more heavy. It's a lot more stuff about a person, a lot more kind of psychological things that you can pull, body movement, biometric data, a bunch of stuff like that. So some of the signals that we can see from Oculus, Facebook, Meta now is what they put in their terms of service. And I've been trying my best to follow along with their terms of service, especially using their Oculus products. And they treat your use of virtual reality, especially using Oculus, much like they treat the use of Facebook for their users. They're not the customers, they are the clients. And therefore, everything you upload to Facebook, pictures, video, Facebook has a right to use, a right to own. Even though you would back out of using Facebook, Facebook still holds on to your pictures like a vindictive ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or something. So you can see similar things in their terms of service as a big signal to where they want not only to control the things that you upload in Oculus, but your digital being, your movements, your data is all being tracked, including your physical features, the content you upload, the interactions you have with the device, so your body movement. I show you in other videos in the past that your body movement can identify you even though you think you're anonymous inside of virtual reality. Your environmental dimensions and movement data. This tells you information about the environment you're in, the objects around in your room, because there's out-facing cameras in the Oculus Quest. That data can be used as well. And then, weirdly, just as Facebook was getting in trouble for Cambridge Analytica and a couple of other scandals, that same week, this is how tone deaf I think this signal might be, Oculus, already taken over by Facebook in large part already and turned into Facebook Reality Labs, announced that they would be opening up to third-party developers more information about the use of the Oculus headsets. Now, I don't know specifically what information extra they opened up. Maybe they were keeping some things extra safe, optimistically thinking. But to announce that the same week that they were getting in big trouble and being pulled in front of Congress to open up and allow people, when they were already in trouble for allowing third parties access to your data using Facebook, which really shows that they're pushing forward and they see your use of this data inside of virtual reality as a massive revenue stream to then gather money. So your headsets, Oculus headsets, are partially subsidized with the data that you put into it. So perhaps they could have an advanced version of an Oculus in the future where they are less able to take data from you, but it'll be much more expensive. We can already see this already as another signal. They have Facebook for Business, which you have to pay a substantial extra amount per headset. It's almost double the price. You have to pay an extra subscription fee, $100 a year, to use headsets using Facebook for Business, but that will allow the businesses using those headsets an extra amount of security, privacy to conduct their research, their businesses, their proprietary software in virtual reality, et cetera, et cetera. So you can already tell that Facebook has this data collection kind of built into their business model of selling the headsets, and it shows in their terms of service. One kind of positive thing that we've seen out of this, though, is Facebook is starting to slowly back away with the requirement of having a Facebook login to use the Oculus Quest devices, their VR devices. This was especially getting educators like me up in arms. We want to use these headsets in the classroom, requiring students to log into Facebook to interact with the content on the Oculus. Therefore, connecting all of the biometric data that you do inside of virtual reality to all the things that you have done in your Facebook account outside, and all the extra data that Facebook has collected about you over the years to it. So now on Reddit and a few other places, we're starting to see that if you wanted to, you can start decoupling your Facebook account with your Oculus account. Now, Oculus is going to be slowly going away and turning into Meta, probably, or Oculus will be the Facebook arm under Meta. But like I said, they're going to be Meta first, so that means maybe the Facebook data will go to Meta or Oculus instead of having you log in through Facebook. It's, even though this is kind of an optimistic signal, not having to have a Facebook account or connecting it to directly a Facebook account, by no means does this mean that your data is now separated between Facebook and Oculus or their headset devices in the Quest or Quest 2 and now Quest Pro coming out in the near future. But nevertheless, this is a slightly encouraging signal. Okay, last one. This one Zuckerberg talked a lot about in the keynote that he addressed, and one of the things that early Metaverse developers, augmented reality developers, VR developers want is interoperability. As someone that grew up in the beginning of the internet and saw the optimism, the cooperation, the freeness of an open internet at the beginning, and see that slowly built up with walled gardens and government the Great Firewall and other kind of things kind of pop up to make it a little less free, a little less open. Things like net neutrality being invaded and ISPs taking further control of how data is being used. Interoperability is a big concern for developers, and on the education side is also a huge deal. And Zuckerberg gave a little bit of lip service to this, basically saying it's important, but not necessarily telling us how he plans to make things operable. But one signal that we can get from this is how the Oculus headset regarded a community that popped up around creating and distributing apps, basically making a store, a lot like the Epic Games versus Apple lawsuit that happened last year, saying because Apple has basically a monopoly on how apps are distributed and sold on their devices. Facebook largely was fighting for the same monopolistic system on the Quest. They wanted to get their 20-30% of all apps and subscriptions that were sold for the Oculus devices. Again, that's probably put into the subsidy of the low price and development of the headsets to begin with anyway. So when a community got together and started making a community to allow people to sideload, basically connect your Oculus headset to a PC device and load things on it without going through the Oculus Quest store, Facebook didn't like it, and they took some steps to prevent it. They looked into suing them. In the end, they left them alone, but now they're developing their own app lab, which is going to be a way to distribute apps through Oculus. You have to register as a developer, much like you have to register as a developer for Apple or Google when you distribute apps or develop apps. And you can distribute them through that. It's basically kind of like making a private Google Doc or an unlisted YouTube video, right? You can send people information, the links and the ability to add apps through the App Lab to devices, but it will not be in the store. You will not see it advertised. It will not be searchable through the app. You have to kind of do that on your own. And so SideQuest is now probably going to work through the App Lab. All the people developing games that can't get denied or don't want to pay the 30% commission fee through that will probably be able to put stuff through the App Lab. Now, there's still the gatekeepers here of things being able to be put on the Oculus Store and being able to be distributed to the Oculus devices, the Quest devices. So you can take this as an optimistic or a pessimistic signal. What it says to me is that it's still going to be very much a possible revenue stream that Facebook or Meta is going to try to exploit in controlling the hardware that people get their quote-unquote metaverse software or apps from. But most people, they think about the metaverse, it's basically the internet. It's like a browser. And you can go anywhere, search anywhere, and do anything on the web, right? It's called web surfing. You don't download a lot of apps on the web, even though a lot of apps are being downloaded automatically all the time when you do websites. Another story. But a lot of people, when they think about an interoperable metaverse, they think about basically a world in which anybody can go in and start adding virtual real estate, much like you would add a website with little effort, little cost, and everybody has access to it. We don't really have anything like that yet, other than WebVR, the new web standards, the A-Frame, and other programming languages that are built on top of the known World Wide Web. So, yes or no, maybe this is a kind of an iffy signal where this one might go as far as interoperability. I tend to think that Facebook wants to control the hardware because they have issues in the past. Another signal there is they just lost a bit of revenue in the last quarter or two because Apple has denied the tracking of data in their apps on iOS devices. And so they are looking to get more Oculus headsets in the hands of more people so they can have direct access to that data, direct control over what kinds of things can be tracked and used through that process. So how far they can push it will be depending on that getting their toes wet, getting their feet wet, and trying to push the optimization of this revenue stream as much as possible. All right. That is your 3 areas and 3 signals for the metaverse. And I think that's going to wrap up for now this series on Meta's metaverse, the Schmetaverse. I have a ton more things coming out on the YouTube channel, a lot more research happening, public talks, outreach. Please consider taking a look at any of that on my website or my YouTube channel, etc., etc. But for now, we'll see you guys later. Bye now.